Welcome back to Roar, the only show whose marginal analysis indicates it should have gone out of business several years ago. Anyways, let's get this randomizer started. Oh, what? We got the anime Shimoneta. I bet you're wondering what the odds of that happening are. The answer is statistically guaranteed because this time the whole show has been rigged. I was watching this from recommendation and decided that this anime just had to be reviewed. I felt a civic duty as an upstanding American citizen to bypass the general norms to make way for this anime. Regardless, from your perspective, this anime is still random. Let's get started with the story. Going back to the microeconomics intro, the best way to maximize profit in a perfectly competitive industry is through cutting down costs since you can't regulate price. Extending that to this show, we're gonna have to cut down on how the story part is structured because it takes way too long to create and produce, and probably too long for you guys to even view. And since I never even intended for this to be a RAR, I never wrote down notes for this either. So to put this in the most professional terms possible, Shimoneta, a boring world where the concept dirty jokes doesn't exist, is an ecchi comedy anime centered around a fictitious world in which Japan has enacted anti-deviancy laws that prevent people from speaking or acting in sexual manners, in public or private, through the use of metal devices known as peacemakers. These PMs, as they are called, will notify the Japanese FBI whenever a lewd action occurs in order to detain these delinquents. For years, the Japanese government cracked down on porn, burning all things deemed too sexual. Even so much as saying penis or vagina is enough to get you in serious trouble. Several decades later, rebellious factions of porn terrorists, as they are called, start popping up to actively terrorize the general public with lewd material they had hidden from the government. The show starts off with their generic protagonist Tanukichi, the son of one of the former terrorists, moving into a new high school in an attempt to clear his family name. This prestigious academy is one of the most moral in the country, where students are so pure that they don't even know what could be considered lewd. Tanukichi is headed on the train to the first day of school when he notices this gorilla-sized man staring him down. Before the man can do anything to him, he's pulled into a scam by a fraudulent sexual harassment caller who hopes to earn money by profiting off of his litigation in court. This is one of the many times we see the theme of perversion of justice, no pun intended, which Tanukichi sees as wrong, so he steps to intervene by claiming that he's the one who placed hands on her. He drags her out, only to realize that he's going to be in deep shit, as now the entire government is going to be on his tail. Luckily for him, a female porn terrorist known as Blue Tundra comes out in the nick of time to distract the police so he can escape. Blue Tundra is a high school girl wearing nothing but a bedsheet, and will become one of our main protagonists later. She makes it figuratively snow lewd hentai pictures, causing everyone in the terminal to keel over in excitement. Recall that they've all been brainwashed, so they don't know how to actually cope with the feeling of horniness. Tanukichi's just trying to chill, and this girl Fuwa-san has to come around and be sus. You see, Tanu's the only person in the entire school who has access to deviant knowledge by proxy of his father, so if you need to know how babies are made, like Fuwa-san here, Tanukichi's your guy. For the same reason, he's hired to join the student council, as even though they're supposed to be the ones cracking down on sexual deviancy, they don't actually know what it is. On the school council, he finds three people: the gorilla man you saw earlier, a quiet girl with black hair, and the president, Anna. Anna is the moral exemplar of perfection not only for the student body, but also for Tanukichi in particular, who has a heavy crush on her. When he was little, he was ostracized by everyone because his father was that guy, except Anna, who was so morally pure that she could look past Tanu's sinful family and be friends with him. Tanu feels morally obligated to pay her back by changing his ways and becoming as moral as her. After heading to a cafe with the girl with the black hair, the VP Ayame, he soon realizes that she is Blue Tundra, and he's blackmailed into joining her porn terrorist faction SOX. She has a special device handed down from her questionable father, which allows the user to jam up the PM for up to 3 minutes. How convenient, allowing her to make sexual jokes for the audience's benefit. Together, they hatch a plan to rebel against the social oppression casted by the government. While Tanu cross-dresses as Blue Tundra to distract the school council, Ayame sneaks into the projector room of the high school during the assembly and changes the video footage to a clip of Fuwa's flies mating, with her added in dub, in order to introduce these kids to the idea of sex. They are all overcome with waves of orgasms, which they have no idea what to do with, but that's a problem for another episode. Tanukichi is able to slowly gain the trust of the student council. Sox starts a plan to get the student body into actively searching for lewd material by hiding such inserts along the school, though it backfires when Anna finds one and, not knowing what it is, hangs it up on her wall. Anna's innocence is a huge turn-on for Tanu, and he begins to fall in love with her again, but Ayame warns that getting with Anna is a dangerous prospect, as when she gets real, she gets real. Not to mention her parents are the government figures who helped create the morality laws in the first place and want to strengthen them further. To further educate these kids, the next day Sox hatches a plan where they teach them the vernacular to describe genitalia and other sexual material while they get their physicals done. They also plan to contaminate all the male urine samples with protein to make it look as though they masturbate to make the government go woonk. Oh, and if you're wondering, yes, this does hold scientific water. While Ayame distracts the student council, Tanukichi dressed as Blue Tundra attempts to teach the kids words on a chalkboard, but he is unable to bring himself to do so. Unfortunately, Ayame can't hold off Anna for too long and she finds Tanukichi and attempts to catch him. Finally, Tanu gets a look at what Ayame was warning about. Tanu is chased all the way to the roof by Anna, where he is again conveniently saved by Ayame, who distracts Anna away so that he can finally take off the costume and breathe. Breathe he may not, however, without being spotted by an artistic lolly who is also on the roof. That girl Otome is a very talented artist who is renowned throughout the school for her abilities. When going up to accept one of her awards, however, she tears it up, claiming she doesn't deserve it because she's in a slump. She yoinks Tanukichi from class and extorts him to help her solve her romantic issues that seem to prevent her from painting. Tanukichi takes her out for dinner, where they play a game where on the count of 3 they say the person they love. While Tanu was going to say Anna, Otome also says Anna, causing Tanu to falter and say that he has a crush on Ayame. For whatever reason, this means that all that relationship development potential between Tanu and Anna will mysteriously disappear. Meanwhile, Anna's been receiving some creepy stalker letters, so the student council devises a plan to catch the stalker by having Ayame pretend to be Anna's boyfriend on a date at the park. They decide to have Ayame cross-dress, much to Tanu's dismay. At the same time, however, Tanukichi decides to go with Otome regardless of the student council's plans, where he learns that Otome's artistic ambitions stem from her love from Anna. These stalker nobas appear and Tanu thinks he can be that dude and save Anna, but his execution fails horrendously. In an attempt to push her out of the way, Tanukichi ends up tackling Anna and kissing, and of course smashing, her. It must be Easter because this Bibba pressed the estrogen button and eggs are a-flowin'. No, he not only pressed it, he jammed that shit. For the rest of the anime, Anna turns into a sex-driven beast with a libido even Freud would be afraid of. This stems, of course, from Anna's naivety towards sexual intimacy and romanticism, resulting in her primitive mind not realizing the consequences of her actions as she doesn't view them as sexual. Anna is used as a prime piece of evidence by the writers to show the dangers of sex censorship. Instead of leading to a pure society, censorship leads to a depraved and confused one, as we see develop throughout the course of this anime. Ayame recruits Otome to SOX, seeing that her ability to draw, especially the ability to draw lewd images, will lend to the organization's efforts to spread sexual content. They even figure out a way to draw without hands, using teeth so that the government can't trace her hand movements and figure out what she's doing. Ayame now initiates the second part of her plan, being the placement of hidden explicit magazines in the school so that SOX can get the student body to actively chase after erotica. Since the Japanese government has been quite vigilant in burning anything remotely erotic, ammunition for these rebels is few and far between, only held in remote areas known to few. Ayame receives word of one such stash on a private estate called Yotsuga Forest. The issue is that going to the forest would be trespassing, and on top of that, the coming Saturday, Anna's mother, the head of the educational reform sector who created these laws, is investigating the area, creating a deadline. The plan then is to somehow create a mass diversion with all the students of the student body. A serious dent is thrown into SOX's plans, however. Anna's mother somehow brainwashes the students into agreeing with legislation that would force them to wear chastity belts, or metal belts that would be able to detect when one is engaging in sexual intercourse. This legislation would be passed Sunday, forcing SOX to take more drastic measures. Meanwhile, Tanu decides to confront his stalker, who turns out to be none other than Anna, who invades his house and rapes him. That's not an exaggeration. Even Wikipedia lists that as the official plot. I've always found it quite interesting that societal pretenses on the sexes leads many to falsely believe that women can't possibly rape when it seems rather obvious that they can, as seen here. I guess if it happens to a guy, they're supposed to enjoy it, but hey, that's just society for you. Anyways, this scene basically exists so you can shamelessly beat your meat as his fan service. If I recall correctly, I think it does tip over from ecchi antics to straight up hentai, so you're welcome. We clearly see that Anna's sheltered childhood has made her privy to her own sexual id, blinding her from the gravity of her criminal actions. In fact, a lot of crimes are committed by sanctimonious people, who in their twisted heads think that they're doing the right thing. In this case, since love is such a pure and perfect construct, Anna believes that any means possible to satisfy this love is justified by the ends. It's Saturday and the government plans to enact X prohibition, the law mentioned earlier, tomorrow. Kinda wild. The plan is for Tanu to spread a bunch of porn around the high school while simultaneously placing maps of Yotsuga Forest in the files to subconsciously direct their sexual depravity to lead them there. The only issue is that Anna is basically going full ape mode, chasing him down like a Mexican mom issuing una nalgada. In the process, Tanu drops the sauce and gets copped from. Sometimes Noba has to throw out the dish to save the cook. Fortunately for him, through some nice plot convenience, Fuwa somehow managed to recover the goods and lays a surprising siege of raging hormones on Sunday. The students intelligently use conventional gender norms to bait the authorities in guarding the area to think that the boys are the ones laying siege, when in reality it's the girls, motivated by that juicy BBC, that are the real hunters. At the same time, Blue Tundra and Tanu happen to be there, getting aped on by Anna as she is unconsciously drawn to his aromatic dick sweat. Blue Tundra sacrifices herself as a diversion, eating Tanukichi off a cliff to save him from the sexual beast. Somehow, the man's ends up lying right by Earth's pussy, which is played to his benefit as once he enters he finds out that it's actually a sauce fountain. Hearing Anna ganging up on Ayame, he boldly makes the manly sacrifice. He wears a BDSM outfit he finds lying in the cave with God knows how much D&D girl crust on it, and goes to confront Anna. Anna is now met with a moral quandary, falling suspect of the classic Socratic dilemma. Her senses betray her perception, as even though her eyes tell her that is not the same as her love interest, her pheromonacal receptors tell her that this is the same scent he exudes, causing her to mentally break down from the possible reality that her sexual frustration is not isolated to Tanukichi. This mental dilemma results in her fleeing the scene in confusion, giving Socks a narrow win. That night, when Sophia is doing press for a new bill, she is forever humiliated when her image feed of the plan's outlines is replaced with pornography from the forest, leading to her push being ultimately crushed. Socks decides to advance their plans to the next level. Now that they've got these teenagers sexually aware, they now need them to learn how to realize these feelings through masturbation. I'm gonna be frank for a second, if you came to beat your meat, this episode's the one. This episode is a long string of Tanukichi being sexually embarrassed by virtually every girl in the series, so if that's your shindig, by all means go for it. While Ayame makes homemade lube for the boys, which is 2 parts cornstarch and 1 part water for all you noobs out there, Tanukichi is tasked with convincing Fuwa to unknowingly make vibrators for the girl. He's able to quid pro quo for the vibrators. That is, in exchange for her ability to get some personal research in the field of male anatomy, he can get tiny bead-like vibrators. Like Zelensky with Trump, this corrupt deal almost goes through, had it not been for the fact that, like Congress, Anna caught wind of this exchange and manipulates it for her own self-interest. Consider Tanu impeached, because he is getting no action from Fuwa. Her jealousy fuels her lust, but like the Senate for Trump, Tanukichi has one last ace up his sleeve. He gifts Anna one of the vibrators, buying him enough time to get away. Unfortunately, Anna interprets the charm as a pendant, which will prove to be costly for Tanukichi, as you can see some obvious issues with the vibrating pendant given the figure of Anna. When Tanu brings one of the vibrators home for the gang to fuck around with, they end up getting it to work, but I guess they did not calculate the farads required for the circuit components because it would appear that the battery is supplying far too much current, and I would recommend more resistors. Unfortunately, because of some jank Bluetooth technology, the other vibrator is also activated but unable to be turned off for some reason. Nobody seems to care about this issue except for Tanu, which is quite rude of them. Anna is woke and assaults poor Tanu again, straddling him. Fortunately for him, my boy Maxwell came in clutch with the addition of wave propagation into Faraday's speculation of static electric fields, and assumedly the juice from Anna was exerted with such a velocity that trace ferromagnetic particles within the fluid were able to generate a counter field that even Gauss would have been impressed with, effectively blowing the circuit and ending Tanu's suffering. Or pleasure. Honestly, at this point, you can't help but feel bad for this man. Like every time he is in a single IMF bond with a person of the opposite sex, Anna goes all www.eroticwrestling.com on his ass. It is the weakness of every borderline hentai ecchi anime to devolve into lolly degeneracy somewhere around halfway throughout the season, and this show is no exception. Basically, Socks now has to engage into some diplomatic measures with other militant groups in order to make sure that everyone has adequate resources, so to speak. Like Stalinist Russia, there are certain groups who appear to be fighting for the righteous cause, but they have deep faults of their own. One day, headlines are made across the news that there's been a series of guerrilla undergarment attacks across the city, which the attackers credit to Socks. Ayame wants none of this panty raiding, as while Socks may resort to juvenile offenses, she feels that a line has to be drawn when it comes to breaching federal law. In my opinion, Socks takes the wrong measures here, deciding to instead covertly work with the police by betraying the radical militant group White Top. When staging a revolutionary movement, labor is the most important of all resources. The last thing you want are enemies. I realize my speech is making me sound like I'm drawing from experience, but this is an objective standpoint, I swear. Don't come after me, government. So to me, it would make the most sense as a moderate group to try and reason with this underwear fetish radical group in de-radicalizing them to knock some sense into them. Well, they're the main characters, not me, so they decide to attempt and capture one of the militants in the girls' locker room. As is always the case with school-related operations, Tanu gets shortchanged once again, getting raped by Anna, who is, as usual, there to put a nail in Socks' plans. It's unnerving how Tanu is blatantly abused but ignored by witnesses like Anna's personal aide because of the sheer amount of power that Anna's family holds with them. And to think you jerk off to this, you deranged fuck. The homie Goriki, basically just Donkey Kong, is able to cop some of these felons as well. I swear, they do this man's dirty, portraying him as a literal ape throughout this series. It seems that the entire school wants to sexually harass Tanukichi, as apparently one of the most popular black market magazines held by Socks Alliance merchants are fanfic yaois of Tanu and Goriki. It ain't pretty, man. It ain't pretty. Later that night, Tanu runs into cliché Lolly, who tackles him into the ground in the most cliché way imaginable. Though she does this not through plot contrivance, but rather to manipulate him into protecting her from the anime police, who are hot on her tail. The girl is about to betray him when she realizes that he's a member of SOX, and realizes that his standing is useful for her further advancement in society. This girl's name is Kosuri, daughter of the fabled aero terrorist Keisuke, who was apprehended by the government earlier. Ayame is initially like, nah, but then she sees the phallic hairstyle that Kosuri spouts and is somehow convinced she's a useful addition to the team. We get another epic bra violation moment for Tanukichi as he wakes up one night with a cold sweat to find Kosuri sleeping in a sleeping bag with him. He also wakes up to find a murderous Anna, who is standing right up above him like a sleep paralysis demon, threatening to castrate him because of the seeming implications that Tanukichi is with another girl. He somehow saves his manhood by convincing Anna that Kosuri is his sister, barely saving his skin, if you catch my drift. It's crazy that this is played for humor. I mean, don't get me wrong, when I first saw this I also found it amusing, but as I reflect on it now, writing the script, it seems morally wrong to enjoy such scenes. Societal conditioning, I guess. You see so many nutshots in PG cartoons that you become desensitized to clear sexual violence through animated mediums towards males, but heightened awareness of sexual violence against women, as seen in the recent feminist movements, makes us hypersensitive to the same violence against women. It's the classic double standard. Meanwhile, the school ramps up its security, with Anna's father bringing in Oboro, Anna's personal assistant, to do the student council's job and find what's inappropriate and what's not. Here, the anime again raises the interesting point that censorship inherently relies on someone being immune to it, as since Oboro has also lived a sheltered life, she doesn't know what's lewd and what isn't, confiscating sports equipment and toilet paper but letting yaoi magazines slide. She's like a machine learning algorithm, only that she's manipulated by the student body to be completely ineffective at her job. While Ayame is away engaging in diplomacy with other militant groups, Kosuri takes charge, much to Tanu's chagrin, and is completely successful in spreading erotica to a neighboring school. She does this by employing her knowledge of hentai tropes, very ironic, I know, to manipulate the student council in this school into falling in love with each other, much to Tanu's consternation. While Tanu is clearly enraged by this, for whatever reason he can't bring himself to tattle on her because he's just like that, yo. This just in, more girls completely take advantage of Tanu. More at 7. Kosuri, high off her power trip, treats Tanu like a literal slave. While you'd think that there'd be some payoff to this femdom, like Kosuri being humbled, or learning of her actions and apologizing to Tanu and becoming close to him, or even Tanu getting back at her, this goes literally nowhere and it's just there so we can pity poor Tanu for being put through the ringer by yet another girl. SOX has their back against the wall, having to deal with the school's new detection algorithms and the fabric faction of people who believe militancy should be more extreme. SOX now launches their two-pronged attack on the school prefect and the gathered fabric. Like every episode, Tanu gets absolutely broad on. In Ayame's plan, Tanukichi uses used underwear as bait for the panty sniffers to get them all into one room. But as any logical person can guess, it backfires because that hound dog Anna sniffs them out first, attracted to the smell of dick sweat. Oboro is by Anna's side but can't do anything to aid Tanu because she's under absolute orders to never interfere with Anna's desires. Tanu is able to keep Anna busy with his underwear while he continues to lay siege to gathered fabric. He ends up in the girls' locker room where he thinks he's going to stop yet another panty raider, only to find that the crotch he kicks belongs to Oboro. Perpetuating the stereotype that only guys can get hurt from injuries to the crotch, Tanu discovers that Oboro was actually just a dude the whole damn time. Oboro reveals to him the oppressive nature of Anna's family and how they own everything about him, including his gender, as though he's a slave, demonstrating how economic inequality further stems power abuse in society. As SOX plans their next move, they receive a handwritten message on a panty telling them to meet the writer at the park. There they encounter the leader of Gathered Fabric, White Peak. Diplomacy fails between SOX and Gathered Fabric as their diverging morals cause them to criticize each other, similar to IRL negotiations with the religious extremist groups. What was meant to be a peace talk instead stems more conflict between the two, as the next day the terrorists cut the monorail line and hold all bus members hostage, pointing guns at them. On one speaker, White Peak loudly declares war on Japan's government and claims that his guerrilla group is affiliated with SOX, which is not true. The Gathered Fabric members hold up each bus and demand the undergarments of every passenger, though SOX is able to defuse the situation, starting with Hyoka. Hyoka, the big-brained individual that she is able to use basic physics 1 knowledge to calculate the force required to lift a gun and the relative tensile force used by the gun carrier, only to see that the force used is significantly smaller, making the gun fake. On another bus, Anna straight up WWE's the bad guys, ending their careers. On Tanu and Goriki's bus, everyone is about to turn in their undergarments when the sight of Goriki naked in women's underwear causes everyone to vomit and dip. Meanwhile, Ayame gets some insider info on the identity of White Peak, Takuma. They develop panty masks infused with that Febreze-type musk in order to overpower Takuma's unique olfactory abilities. Ayame also has Kosuri go out and amass hundreds of white panties to hopefully lure Takuma out of the bus. Unfortunately for Tanu, his musk molarity wasn't high enough, so instead of overpowering Takuma, the smell actually turned him on and beefed up his stats. Ayame, however, fared better with the recency order, and together they are able to apprehend him. Can you imagine the bacterial infections going on right now? Like, I mean, seriously, antibiotics are about to start failing from how much these guys are going to need to use them. You thought we was chillin', but all of a sudden the match list changed to accommodate for balancing. Kosari switched to the blue side, revealing that she had disguised herself as one of the hostages the whole time. She kicks Ayame out of the bus, sending a shocked Ayame running as the police tail after her. That phallic-headed bitch declares that she's part of Gathered Fabric now, and points a stun gun at Tanu. As my boys in Detroit can tell you, when a thug pulls up with a cap, ain't no longer the time for capping. You just dip, like Tanakichi does here. It's the 11th episode, and like Handshakers, you're wondering how in the fuck Sox is going to revolutionize the government and repeal the morality laws, as a good ending should follow in less than 2 episodes. Well, the short answer is no, because of the classic blunder of assuming that your show is going to get a second season when it ends up not doing so. The situation of the Gathered Fabric has escalated into a national emergency, with 500 plus student hostages being held at a barricaded Hoshigaoka Academy, and the government reluctantly complying to the demands of Gathered Fabric for food and resources like panties in exchange for Gathered Fabric not publishing humiliating photos of students in lead positions, as they would reflect poorly on the enforcement of morality laws. Realizing that they must stop White Peak in order to clear Sox's name, they decide to infiltrate the academy. Otome, their insider among the hostages, helps the hostages escape by drawing perspective art in front of all the cameras to make it seem like they were still there. That was a nice change of pace from the typical cliché hostage breakout, though I have to wonder how in the world GF didn't notice Otome drawing in the first place, because although I'm not an artist, I'm pretty sure drawing something as quickly and skillfully as this would take lots of time. After breaking out, they begin drawing paper panties to distract the GF guards with their own lustful desires. Tanakichi, for the price of his underwear, is able to convince Anna to join their side, and together they beat up the GF members. Meanwhile, Takuma reveals that he had no plan for revolution at all, and that he was just using the moment to gather panties for himself. This causes Kosari to mutiny and attempts to use the stun gun on him, though it doesn't work, and due to his many layers of insulation, it's time for an all-out attack. Forgetting any sort of rivalry they may have had in the past, the main characters decide to agree to wail on this dude's nuts, which is the kind of fan service you're getting now, boyo. Basically, how it goes down is comparative trade, where Anna can provide at least 3 kick-ass for one of Tanakichi's underwear. Business is business, I guess. Obviously, the overpowered pro-tag team wins, and suddenly the main character goes full MLK mode, preaching the already obvious morals and lessons of the story just in case you have the IQ of a rock. Everyone is like, wow, so beautiful, that's so moving. But in reality, this is what we call in the bureaucratic world constipation, because it's not gonna do jack shit. Everyone forgets whatever development they had past episode 5, and Kosari goes back to Sox. And oh yeah, screw that love triangle idea between Tanu, Ayame, and Anna, because no, here at Shimoneta, we're allergic to interesting and logical plot developments. So yeah, that's as far as the main plot goes, of course. The show also felt to the tragic hubris of that affects all anime shows, expecting a second season. Because they expected a second season, there are a lot of plot threads that are simply left stranded, like, I don't know, the main storyline about rising up against totalitarian bureaucrats. But oh well, season 2 when? This episode is more bonus fan service content than anything. The gang plus Anna decide to go to a relaxing spring resort somewhere in who cares, Japan, and of course hilarious hijinks ensue at Fan Service Incorporated. While preparing to go, Tanakichi's like, oh shit, I almost forgot to pack the episode MacGuffin, this artifact that Tanu inherited from his father only to use when he gets to Nowhere, Japan. Everybody assumes this chick Sophia invited them here, except for Anna, who thought this was an arranged pimp house for herself. Repeat after me, ladies. Smother in titties, not water. Yo man want that adipose, not that pulmonary edema type shit. And for real though, this show needs to get up and make a fucking decision instead of keeping us all waiting. Either have this man Tanakichi choose the Ayame route, or choose the Anna route, or pick both for all I care. Just stop with this hanging out at the crossroads nonsense, where instead of picking a path, Tana refuses to make a decision to appeal the pimply otaku-gasm ships instead of creating proper character development. Is it too much to ask for character arcs these days? Anyways, all these shenanigans are interrupted by the sounds of Sophia screaming. They go and investigate to find none other than Black Base, some random ape that's infatuated with black lingerie. He demands to have the plot device, Tanu's artifact, which is why he organized this meetup. They find that all their stuff, including the artifact, was replaced by black undergarments, and Black Base then challenges them to the ancient game of strip yakuyen, basically rock, paper, scissors. He reveals that the artifact is actually a key to untold erotic treasures that Tanu's father hid. Uriki decides to take one for the team and lose yakuyen, which results in Black Base paralyzing himself, giving time for Tanu to cop the artifact back. Tanu and Ayame decide to run and hide the artifact so that it can't be used for evil, but then they're like, wait, lust, and then they decide to go and find the shrine. With the help of conveniently placed Hoka, they power up an old cable car up to the treacherous mountain where random ass Anna comes out of nowhere and demanding the key. She breaks the cable line running up to it, barely allowing TA from escaping. They open up the shrine and would you believe it, it's a massive BBC statue. And lo and behold, Black Base wasn't just black, he was also base. So he's like, actually yeah, lol, I meant to trick you into coming here in the first place. Congrats, you win. Pan out shot, sunset, philosophical throwaway line about reminiscing the future, and then end scene. Feels like something's wrong. That's right, none of the plot lines were resolved. Fucking amazing. Just like Handshakers, the main protagonist group never ends up confronting the main antagonist despite hints to it. The last episode leaves you with a cheap taste in your mouth like you licked a bargain bin at the dollar store. The one redeeming aspect of this show is that it was at least rife with fan service. What makes me so annoyed with this show is that it presented so many opportunities for interesting plot lines, like the relationship between Goriki and Tanu, or between Tanu and Ayame, or literally Tanu with any of the characters, or even whatever happens to Gathered Fabric, but that never happens. The only thing we see are random, non-connected sitcom-esque snippets of these people's lives. They usually never grow beyond the episode they were in. I think for a premise the show was original, but it could have definitely taken its idea and fleshed it out much farther and done some actual world building. It was a little over the top with the fan service, and the comedy seems to bank heavily off of raunchiness, but hey, some things are universal, I guess. Comedy is culturally subjective, but everybody can appreciate good fan service. Again, relating to my point from earlier, the show never fully explores any of the relationships between any of the characters, just leaving them tantalizingly almost complete so that the viewer has mere hints of what the interactions are supposed to be between these characters. I mean, isn't it obvious that there should be character progression for Anna, either realizing that her actions are sexually deviant and inappropriate, or learning how to act more affectionately towards Tanakichi so he doesn't feel violated every time she walks on screen? I think that's a message a lot of the viewers of the show would probably need. However, for the few character interactions that were present on the show, most were usually enjoyable, though a few were getting kind of old by the end of the anime, such as everyone's freaking out seeing Goriki's dong, or the whole horny lewd hentai artist gambit with Otome. Overall, there's nothing too interesting about the art style of Shimoneta. It's pretty standard for late 2000s anime. The animation is fluid and the shots are rather plain, though I guess you don't usually care about that sort of thing when 75% of the screen is hogged by massive honkers. One thing I do despise, however, is how they censor with this anime. Yes, even in the uncensored version there's censorship. They use this annoying mascot for the show that just looks plain unappealing, like the New York Mets for snakes, to cover up any unsavory bits, but they'd honestly just do a better job with a plain old pixelation filter or a black bar. All in all, it's not something you notice for being ugly or exceptionally stunning either. In terms of ecchi anime, Shimoneta is pretty up there in terms of plot quality and consistency, which doesn't really mean a lot given the competition. It's a unique and fresh take on the generic harem anime ecchi school council type trope, with an actual story and reason for the excessive lewdness. Story 3 out of 5. Given what it is, it being a way for 12-year-olds to guiltlessly jerk off instead of watching real porn, it at least attempted to have a real plot. r/there was an attempt, am I right, Redditors? Ja 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 ja. But for real though, give this show like 2 more seasons to develop its plot fully instead of pulling a Game of Thrones, and this might have been a 5. Art, 4 out of 5. It's average, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You didn't come here for the artistic framing of the shots, we all know that. In terms of that kind of art, this show isn't the worst thing I've seen, but I'll give it that. In fact, it's pretty good in being what it's meant to be, but horrible at pretending it's not. Character dynamics, 2 out of 5. There were so many good character arcs to be fleshed out here, and yet the writers just chose not to. So unfortunately, given what's presented, I have to give it a score of 2. And overall, that gives us a total of 9 out of 15. Oh, and before we get all riled up, remember that's a score from a conventional art standpoint. If you're looking for an alternative score, this show ranks, in my opinion, at 13.7 out of 15 among that pantheon. And that'll do it for this review, and you can tell from the dated references how long it takes for this to make, so leave a like, please. I'm suffering out here. That's all I want. Or even just a view. Get that audience retention up, you know? I guess I'll see you in the next one then. This is definitely getting demoneyed.